Hi, I'm Sarah Wing of Sarah Wing Intuitive Arts, and I'll be reading the Valkyrie myth of Hanna. Birthed into immortality many years ago, Hanna's life as a Valkyrie was filled with profound intensity. Her existence had been for the drawing out of brave souls into herself for transport to warrior's heaven. She had seen every color of blood, smelled every scent that lingered at sunset, and heard every creature greet a freshly renewed day. Even whilst in slumber, she could track her next capture's scent across the lands. Her life was a lightning charge, ceaseless in its endeavors. Still, there were some things that Hanna could not track, things that slumber as deep as the ocean. Awakening one morning under a golden sky, Hanna was called to a soul. She found her inside a burning village. Looking at the embodied soul, she was struck by just how young a girl lay dying. It was not her small form, but more the small child she felt inside two light brown eyes, albeit now lit with waves of heat and flame. She had carried each soul the same way. Around Hanna's neck was a piece of black tourmaline, as large as the child's fist. The stone was smelted to a metal crescent moon, whose points lingered up toward her shoulders like two proud horns. She took one step closer and perched her body next to the girl. With absolute stillness, the child's last heartbeats pounded through Hanna. Ba-boom! Hanna felt dizzy, and she began to collapse. Ba-boom! Her head and neck fell across the little girl's arm and hand, aglow in the tower of fire. The slain heart began to pulse its last two beats when the child's hand reached up and was sliced open by one side of the Valkyrie's crescent moon. For such a small hand, her red blood released itself with the snapping force of the wind, against and down Hanna's necklace. The black tourmaline stone swallowed so much of the blood that it took the child's last heartbeat as its own to keep along with her soul. This new capture poured through every inch of Hanna. Uncertainty and uneasiness jarred around her head, pondering what to do. Her job was to take souls for safe passage, souls she found by staring into one's heart. Never would she steal one's heart, and felt it wrong to trap a heartbeat, especially the last one before death. But she could only take, she could not return. She could not restore life to the fallen child, but still had to honor the heart of the slain. Hanna stood over the girl. The fire that claimed her now crippled most of her home. With the child's warrior soul, she walked past others that lay dead, wearing the last heartbeat around her neck, out and past the chaos of the mourning and riotous crowds. She came upon a small field and stopped near a patch of rose-bay willow herb. The tiny pink flowers reminded her of the delicate, small, feminine form of the child. The way the flowers clustered and their height reminded her of the girl's strength. Hanna could barely remember being a child, and she imagined playing in such a field as the one she was in now. She felt tired and more like part of the earth than that of someone who stood on it. Drifting in thought, Hanna recalled the last time she felt beckoned to her knees by beating hearts. It was 200 years prior, and she had captured 10 souls in what seemed to be mere moments, and continued to claim 20 more before the next day's dawning. But this day, Hanna had only claimed one soul of a small girl's. She realized right then that there had been a slight moment in which she longed for death with such demand that she stole the child's last heartbeat. Hanna left from the field taking the girl's soul to warrior heaven, but keeping the heartbeat entombed in her black tourmaline stone. She wore the heartbeat as she continued taking soul after soul. When she started to feel sadness, she would sit still for days in hopes of hearing it, but it never made a sound. And for a time, it was enough to be rare and hidden and special. As years passed, she started to savor more and more, to hear the last ba-boom from the warrior's heart, to hear the song created from a vanishing miracle. As a Valkyrie addicted to the sound of a beating heart, she then started to crave ownership of the sound. She knew she had always served the hearts of other warriors, but never her own, and an anger had started to grow. She tried to block out her feelings by only existing with her eyes shut, wanting to only listen for her song. But when she captured a soul, she would have to look down upon the slain's heart, and all she began to see was death. Before long, the smell of death far surpassed the scent of her own sorrow. Death was palpable and pungent, and she could barely stand to be awake to it, so she slept. First, for days at a time, then weeks, then months, then years. Each time laying down to slumber atop a higher and higher mountaintop. She would awake to a beautiful view of the changed landscape, and for a brief time, she would forget about her heartbeat and she would be happy. Some days she would jump off the mountaintops over and over, falling and landing, screaming and not screaming, until one day she acquired company. A crow was flying by and started to watch her as she dove off the side of the mountain again and again. Eventually, the crow began to do the same, and would fly down the side of the mountain with a swift force and then meet her back atop the mountain again. The sound of the crow's caws were not heard at first by Hanna, but she slowly started to listen and felt a sense of joy. "Caw!" she cried out as she catapulted from the cliff. "Caw, caw!" After days of continuous tandem dismounts, she sat atop the mountain accompanied by her crow friend. They cawed at each other until the sun went down and rose again. Hanna would stare at the crow's crisp black feathers. Their color looked like ink and spoke to her as clearly as well-penned words. She started to keep her black tourmaline pristinely polished, wiping off dirt immediately when a strong wind blew. Her crow friend seemed to appreciate this and believed them to grow closer because of it. She began to speak to the crow more and would often tell them that she understood. While placing her hand over the stone, she would say, "I am black in the daytime, under the bluest skies, just like you." Their friendship deepened, and they began to seek out food and water together and would sleep only feet apart. One morning, Hanna woke to find her friend with her head cocked to the side, only inches away from her stone. Her friend stood listening to the trapped heartbeat. She feared she had been found out. "Caw!" she cried out. "Caw!" But the crow didn't waver in stance. She began to weep and tell her tale of the warrior and the fire and of her brief surrender. The crow began to pace, almost in contemplation of how to react. Hanna feared that after hearing this, her friend would fly far away, never to see her again. The crow stretched its wings wide and flew off and down the side of the mountain. Hanna, filled with panic, jumped to her feet and ran to the edge, ready to fly down after her friend. But instead, the crow landed behind her and roared a mighty caw and then another caw, and then another, until Hanna yelled, "What? What am I to do?" The crow took a few steps toward Hanna, as she remained perched at the edge of the mountaintop. The crow stretched its wings out, cawed twice, and then settled still, only to cock its head to the side once more. Hanna cocked her head to the side, and with a forceful grip down upon her necklace, pressed her palm through the stone. Falling to her knees and then off the edge of the mountain, she surrendered the necklace from her neck and into the air. It pierced the very sky above Hanna and traveled a great distance and landed in the ocean. And when it did, the heartbeat was finally released. The energy of thousands of souls had been carried to warrior's heaven in that same stone many lifetimes over. The single heartbeat pounded out with the force of every soul that had once been held inside. The water rose hundreds of feet into the air, only to come crashing straight down again, flooding the land for miles in every direction. What was once stolen in fire had been raised in water, and Hanna heard every pounding sound against the lands. It was her song and her miracle, and it felt like her heartbeat. Crow flew down to her side as she lay at the bottom of the mountain. "Even without her black stone," she said, "I am black in the daytime, under the bluest skies, just like you." She sat up, feeling the rocks now embedded in her back and her skin torn away. Her friend walked behind her in silence, only to abruptly pierce her skin. One peck, another. Hanna twisted her torso around and called out a roaring caw. She stood and spun around to see the crow picking up something small and delicate with their beak. Feverishly, her hands felt around the skin on her back. She looked at the ground, but only saw dirt and rocks surrounding her. She reached her hands to her back again and felt a softness on her fingertips. She looked at the crow with an understanding smile and said, "I am just like you." With one gentle tug, she broke free the tips of small, smashed feathers. They were right below her skin, but she had never felt them before. Her body had been on the battlefields of every kind imaginable, but nothing had ever truly changed her form. Hanna would no longer carry souls, but wings. Finding them smashed and bloody upon her first encounter, but they were her wings nonetheless. This time, she knew that when she healed, she would also be transformed. Looking upon her friend, she shared, "I have felt the power of my heartbeat, and now I have wings." Hanna and Crow would travel across many more mountains, but now love had let her soar. So that is the myth of Hanna. And I say that creating this myth and creating Hanna, the life-size mannequin collage, were pivotal for me. I created them at a time that required transformation, which meant it required a lot of inward reflection. I was experiencing trauma at my job, trauma at my school, trauma in my home life, and trauma in my romantic life. And it just felt like the right time to kind of share this story, what seems to be kind of a global theme right now in conversation. But aside from that, I would, as always, just love to hear what part or entirety of the story means to you, what something represents to you. Any thoughts, feelings? There's never any wrong answer, and I would absolutely love to hear it. So I hope you enjoyed the tale, and I'll see you soon.